Hey, what's up everyone? Well, today we're going to do a follow-up on what to do after you do the initial wiring or styling or cleanup on a common bonsai ficus like this, and then it starts to grow again. After you do a trim back and wiring of a tree like this, the primary thing that you need to keep an eye on is whether or not the wire is cutting in. And that means that, if you're not familiar, that the wire might, as the branches swell, the wire might start to impinge on the growth of the tree. So after as little as a few weeks or as much as a few months, basically you want to remove the wire. And there are two techniques that we commonly use for removing wire from bonsai. One of them is to unwind it, and the other is to cut it off. So first I'll try unwinding this small wire that I used to set two of the branches on this low portion of the tree. And I'm starting out on one branch and I'm unwiring it to the point that we used as the anchor point. And then I'm going to hold that in place as I unwind the other wire. Now, the advantage of unwinding the wire is that you are not liable to accidentally leave small bits of wire hidden in the tree somewhere. And this tree is not super dense, so that maybe that wouldn't be a problem anyway. But sometimes with darker colored wire and a dense tree, you could end up leaving some of the wire on. Now, with bigger wire, as we have here on the main branch of the tree, it is a little bit harder to unwind the wire, and so cutting the wire off is maybe a better option. And if you're not already familiar with bonsai wire cutters, this one is a plier-style wire cutter, and the important thing is that it cuts all the way to the edge here. And the reason that it needs to do that is that when you go to cut the wire off the bark, you want to be able to cut right up to the bark but not actually damage the bark significantly. So if you have a wire cutter that's used for like electrical purposes, it might have the wire cutting portion behind a plier or a set of jaws, and those types are not going to work for this operation specifically. So I'm going to cut off this wire, and basically I'm just taking each coil, each 360-degree loop that has been applied there, and cutting it at intervals so that the wire will just fall off. And sometimes you have to kind of nudge it off, and other times it falls off by itself. Now I'm going to go ahead and go through and remove all of the rest of the wire from this tree now. Usually when you have you don't want to remove the wire from particular trees if the wire hasn't actually succeeded in setting the branch in place. But at the same time, you don't want that wire to scar the branch more than necessary, or at all, depending on your preference. So there's a little bit of a scar on this branch here, but on the smaller branches, there's no scarring of the bark at all. And in certain species, ficus, the branches set really nicely, but in some conifers, they won't really set before they start to scar. So you may have to wire and unwire if you want to avoid wire scars, or you may have to allow the wire scars to happen in order to set the branch prior to unwiring, and that's sort of your choice. that's all the wire off, and if you were watching closely, I used two different pairs of wire cutters, and the first was the one that I showed at the beginning, and then the second was this scissor style wire cutter. And this is great for doing small work. It's not super powerful, so you want to limit your use of it to smaller gauges of wire. And so whenever I feel too much tension on this, when I'm working with slightly larger wire, I will switch to my other wire cutter in order to cut it off. But it's more compact and therefore can get into tighter places where you might have small wire. Now, I haven't trimmed this, and to be honest, as a grower, I am keen to make things sort of change and evolve over time. And so my inclination really with this plant is to just let these shoots grow for a while. It's definitely growing nicely, and when I look at this growth, what I see is that the plant's metabolism is really starting to ramp up. And it's late summer here in San Francisco. We've been getting some nice warm weather, and so that's really driving the leaf and shoot production on here. I could come back and clip a lot of these, but what I see when I look at them is that the size of the branches hasn't really changed that much. And in order for this plant to change and sort of evolve into a more mature looking tree, maybe a tree that looks a little bit more like a ficus, the branches are going to have to get significantly bigger. And in order for that to happen, I'm going to have to let these run. So I'm actually not going to trim these today, and hope that basically by not trimming it, I'm going to get a little bit more wood production back here in the primary and secondary branches, and then I'll come back and trim it a little bit later in the season. As we approach some cold weather, it'll definitely slow down. Now, that's from a basics perspective all you might be thinking about with this tree. But as a crazy bonsai grower, what I think about when I'm looking at this tree is a lot of other things. And I'm not super happy with this S-curve trunk that a lot of these trees have. So coming up, I'm going to do another video, and it's going to involve some different techniques that we can apply to this tree, and maybe I'll make it into a mame. See you guys next time.